get on that ship. The rest of the book. To serve man, it's a cookbook.
You've just entered Untamed Dimensions. Your navigator for this cosmic adventure is Space Ranger Admiral Gorightly, captain of the starship Psychopath. Now, prepare yourself, Earthlings, for Untamed Dimensions. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you may be listening out there in the great American heartland to the pyramidal structures on Mars. You're listening to another illuminating edition of Untamed Dimensions, the show your parents warned you about. Our guest today is the legendary UFO contactee, Dr. Frank E. Stranges. Dr. Stranges is the founder and president of the National Investigation Committee on UFOs. In addition, he is president of International Evangelical Crusades and International Theological Seminary of California. He was born in New York and educated in Brooklyn, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, and California. He holds degrees in theology, psychology, and criminology. Dr. Stranges is an assistant deputy director of the California State Marshals Association and a member of the American Federation of Police. Numerous affiliations with law enforcement, scientific, religious, and public service organizations attest to his dedication to community service. His university and college presentations are recognized as an important contribution to the understanding of the UFO phenomena today. And part of the reason I'm having Dr. Stranges on today is to promote the forthcoming Retro UFO 2 Spacecraft Convention, which is going to be going down here in Landers, California at the Integratron on April 21st and 22nd. And Dr. Stranges will be one of the speakers there. First day, April 21st, the Reverend Bob Short, another legendary UFO contactee, will be speaking on Giant Rock, First Contact, and Beyond is the name of his presentation. Also on that day, you'll have Bob Benson talking about the building of the Integratron, as well as Wendell Stevens speaking that day on spacecraft conventions and Giant Rock. There will also be a Old West reenactment. The Pioneer Town Posse will present cowboys and UFO sightings. And so that's basically the first day. I will be there demonstrating the theremin and synthesizer as well in the inside the Integratron. The second day, April 22nd, is when Dr. Stranges will speak, and his presentation is entitled Ufology and Space Beings. And also Greg Campobasso, screenwriter of Stranger at the Pentagon, will be there as well. Also has a soon-to-be-released book he'll be talking about called Autobiography of an Extraterrestrial, the Starseed Journals. And so that's what's on tap for Retro UFO. Still waiting for Dr. Frank here to call in, so I'll play a little tune, and hopefully Dr. Frank will call in a moment. This is Flying Saucers by the Mellotones.
Flying saucers, well, in the sky. Well, in the sky. Oh, listen to me, children. I'm gonna preach you a sermon. It's not is things that people see. Some say they are, some don't agree. Talk about things that whirl and fly. Folks up in the sky. Some folks talk about atom bombs. Some say it's the sign of a lost storm. Like the kings of old who got the call, couldn't read the handwriting on the wall. Folks who see but don't understand, from the source of God's mighty hand. Well, says if you see them, don't try to understand. Get on your knees and take God's hand. Let them fly, fight and blast. Save us to Jesus to the last. Make some laugh, make some cry.
Alrighty, it looks like we have Dr. Frank on the line here. Dr. Stranges, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, Adam. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for joining us this morning. Before
bless your heart.
Take off to Retro UFO.
How's your weather?
The weather, I'm in Central California. And
are you?
It's a little wet.
I see. Well, we got heavy overcast here in the L.A. area.
Okay. Well, that might cool things down a little bit at Retro UFO. Hopefully we don't get rained on.
Well, it seems like it's quite a few degrees warmer out on the desert.
Mm-hmm. Well, very good. Look forward to seeing you there. I'll start first off by asking you about your background in ufology, how you got involved in researching UFO, and where those investigations led you.
Well, sir, in 1945, I was a student at Eastern Bible College, which is now called Valley Forge Bible Institute, and my roommate was an ex-U.S. Marine flyer. And the first few weeks of school, most of the students swapped yarns as what they did during the war and this and that and the other thing. And he said he was leading a squadron of airplanes, military planes, and they were flying a V formation, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, here came three dish-shaped objects, and they broke their formation. The pilots scattered, and they regrouped the second time, and then the third time, and then finally the commanding officer insisted that they bring the planes back to the base, which they did. And all the pilots were assembled in a boardroom, and they were told, they were not asked, Adam, they were told, what you saw was a flight of high-flying Canadian geese. Well, my roommate was a fantastic mathematician. He whips out his pen, and he starts calculating speed, altitude, velocity, impossible right-angle turns, violating every known law of aerodynamics. And the commanding officer said, Brown, you shut your big fat mouth and don't you say one more word. And then within 15 minutes, they were escorted into another room, and sure enough, here were about a half a dozen reporters, and they were forced to tell these reporters what we saw was a flight of high-flying Canadian geese.
Mm.
Well, my interest was piqued immediately, and I took my entire summer vacation period to visit most of these pilots who fortunately lived up and down the East Coast, and every one of their stories checked out with Brown. What they saw were silver discs. They looked like saucers, and this was back in the early 40s.
Okay.
So I joined several UFO groups, including NICAP in Washington, and started gathering material from all parts of the world.
Yes.
And I found that people were vitally interested in these things, and from that day to this, still the most difficult task is to separate between fact and fiction. But when you have the fact, you hang on to it like a dog hangs onto a bone.
Right. Now, your most famous book, or the one you're most well known for, is Stranger at the Pentagon.
Yes, that's going into the Spanish language in about a week.
Oh, very good.
I'll send you a copy if you'd like.
Yes, please do. Now, could you tell our listeners a bit about this mysterious stranger? I assume a mysterious stranger of unearthly origins. Is that correct?
This is correct. This was an account that really it stymied me for the longest time, because up to that point, this happened in 1959, I was invited to a church, the National Evangelistic Center. The pastor was very gracious, and he wanted me to speak on UFOs and the Bible, which I did. And that night we had a crowd of nearly 2,000 people, and there was standing room only. And again, the interest of the crowd was so phenomenal that it really surprised me. So let me back up about a year and a half.
Sure.
I received a call from Augie Roberts, a former United States Air Force photographer, and he calls me. He said, "Doc, I've got pictures of a man from another planet." I said, "What have you been smoking, Augie?" He said, "Do you want to hear this or not?" I said, "Yes, please, go ahead." And he said he was at the lecture that was held outside on the back lawn of a young man and his wife who were vitally interested in UFOs, and they had a UFO conference in their home, outside their home, rather. And his name was Howard Mencher.
Yes.
And he said there were a group of people, and this fellow, he said, I was fascinated by him. I said, "Well, what makes you think he's from another world?" He said, "When he looked at me, I got the distinct feeling that he could see straight through me." I said, "Okay, my father does that to me now." And he was irritated. I said, "What else?" He said, "Well, the guy had no fingerprints." I said, "All right, keep going." He said there were some people from foreign countries at this particular meeting, and he spoke to them, every last one of them, including a fellow from Africa, from the Gold Coast in Africa, that spoke a very strange dialect. And here this man could speak their language. I said, "Well, that sounds fascinating. When can I see the pictures?" He said, "I'll bring them right over." At that time, I lived in Irvington, New Jersey. So he drove over there and brought me the pictures. So I was fascinated with the pictures. And I put these pictures on a board in various churches and universities and colleges that I was lecturing at that time, along with the other UFO pictures. And the people were asking me more questions about these particular photographs than even the UFO pictures, because people were interested in life and outer space.
Yes.
Well, back in Washington, here I am speaking at this church on UFOs and the Bible. And at the end of the meeting, this lady comes to the platform, and the people were mobbing the platform because I was signing autographs for my first book at that time, which was Saucerama. And she said, "Dr. Strangers, I've got to see you privately." And they taught us in seminary, you've got to be nice to the women, especially in the churches. And this girl was irritating me. And I said, "Well, can you wait just a few moments? I've got a few more 100 autographs to sign here." And she said, "Look, I've got to see you now." And as she spoke, she reached into her purse, and she produced an ID that said the United States Government, Pentagon Building, Office so-and-so, Department so-and-so. Well, I immediately excused myself from the crowd, asked the pastor to let me borrow his office key. This lady wanted to see me privately. I said, "Okay." And as we started to leave the platform, she stopped abruptly in front of the pictures that I had posted on the platform, in front of this gentleman who Augie Roberts claimed was from another world. And she said, "How would you like to meet him personally?" I said, "Are you kidding?" "Of course." I said, "Where is he?" She said, "At the Pentagon." I said to myself, "Okay, here we go. Here's another kook."
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyhow, we left the platform, went into the pastor's study. She pointed her finger at my nose. She says, "Can you, as a former investigator, still follow instructions?" I said, "Yes," again with the finger. She said, "Can you follow instructions without deviating?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "All right, I'll take you to where he is. You'll be in front of your hotel tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, and you'll meet him." Well, I said, "Thank you very much." Well, we left the office. I didn't get much sleep that night because I didn't know what to make of this. I figured if somebody's trying to throw me off the track, at the Pentagon will be an excellent opportunity for them to attempt this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyhow, I was there at about 7:30 in the morning in front of that cold December sidewalk in front of the hotel, and sure enough, she pulls up at 8 o'clock sharp. She looked at me, opened the door for me. She said, "Good morning, Dr. Frank." I said, "Good morning." And we got in. And if anyone is familiar at all with the flow of traffic toward the Pentagon from Washington, they know the flow of traffic goes to the right, but she turns to the left and parks against the fence. And a security guard was there. He saluted her. She saluted back. He looked at me, saluted at me. Naturally, I saluted at him. And there we were, outside of her car, walking toward the side entrance of the Pentagon. And here were a whole lineup of people, some in plain clothes, some in uniform, military uniform. And I said, I notice all these people have ID. They have badges either on their coats, their blouses, or whatever. And she said, that's okay. And as she spoke, she removed again that ID from her purse, pinned it to her blouse, opened her jacket, of course. And then we got in line. I said, "Nancy, I don't have any ID here." She said, "Okay, just get back in line, get behind me, do exactly what I do." I said, "What are you going to do?" She said, "For God's sake," she said, "watch me." Oh, boy, we got closer and closer to this. The guard, in my eyes, was getting taller and taller. He was writing on a tablet. I don't know what he was writing. But as people passed him, he would check them off, evidently. And the third person in front of us was a Marine sergeant, and he passed, saluted the guard and all that stuff. And then Nancy was first, and then I was first. Well, I noticed when she walked by, she had closed her jacket and her coat over the blouse, and she opened her coat and walked right on by. Well, that put me first in line, so I opened my coat and walked on by. What he saw on my shirt, I don't have the foggiest idea. But then I caught up with her. She said, "You did fine. We have one more." I said, "One more what?" She said, "One more security guard." I said, "Once, maybe, twice, I'm not too sure." She said, "Will you please get back in line?" Well, this happened twice. And I was expecting this guy to grab me by the nape of the neck and say, "What in the Sam Hill you trying to do, buddy?" Mm-hmm. But nothing. And here we were in the corridor. We turned right, and it was the same corner of the Pentagon that was destroyed when the plane hit it back several years ago, if you remember.
Oh, interesting.
That whole section was demolished. Nevertheless, here we are standing in front of a door, no mark, no number, no ID on the number, on the door. And she said, "He's in there." She said, "I'll see you in church tonight." I said, "I sure hope so." And as she walked away from me, I put my hand on the doorknob, and then I spun around quickly, and I caught up with her. I said, "How do I get out of here?" She said, "Oh, my God, you're some former investigator." She said, "Get behind someone and open your coat and do the same thing as when you came in." I said, all right. So here we are, standing at the door, myself. I walked into this office. Dead ahead of me are two flat-top desks pushed together, two Air Force people writing. In the right-hand corner, another Air Force officer who was a sergeant, rather. He was typing. I walked into the room. They paid no attention to me whatsoever, Adam. Nothing. No recognition whatsoever. I cleared my throat. I coughed. I opened the door again and closed it with a noise. Nothing. And then to my right, there was a movement, and I turned around, and here standing, 6 foot tall, looked about 185 pounds, brown wavy hair, brown eyes, this man whose picture I've been carrying with me for about a year and a half, with his hands outstretched, he said, "Hello, Frank, how are you?" Well, I nearly fell through the floor. How did he know my name? And we discussed things for about 1/2 hour. And he was telling me things about my own life, about my own childhood that I never knew myself, that I had to check with my parents and my grandparents to determine the validity of his statements. Mm-hmm. And they were true right down the line. Well, he did look at me, and I felt he was looking straight through me, just like he said he would. And his hand was very soft, and yet he had a very firm grip. And before I left his hand, released his hand, sure enough, I turned his hand over, no fingerprints. His fingertips was bald as a peeled boiled egg. And
Very
then my questions began. I said, "Sir, where are you from?" He said, "I'm from the planet that your Bible calls the morning and the evening star." I said, "Venus?" He said, "Yes." I said, "But Venus is surrounded by the deadly methane gases, 800 degrees Fahrenheit plus plus." He laughed. He said, "Yes, we live on the interior." I said, "That's interesting." I said, "How long have you been here?" He said, "This coming March 16th will mark 3 years that I've been a guest here of your government." At that time, President Eisenhower was in charge of the government, and Mr. Nixon was the vice president. So I asked him some biblical questions because I, being a minister, of course, I was curious. I said, "Do you have a Bible like we do?" He said, "Why would we need a book when we're still walking in unbroken fellowship with the Creator?" And that sent goosebumps up and down my back, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And out of curiosity, I said, "You claim to be from another world, and do you have a uniform?" And as I spoke those words, he turned to a closet, reached in, and he produced on a wooden hanger this outfit that was looked like something out of Buck Rogers. The sunlight that came in the window glistened off of this outfit. It just looked like silver and gold threaded together. It was just beautiful. And it also including the boots. It was all one piece. And then he removed his jacket because I was about to ask him if he would demonstrate. Sure enough, he stepped into the boots after kicking his shoes off. And then he pulled this outfit over his shoulders after he took his jacket off, of course. And I saw in the front of the outfit no buttons, no clips, no zipper, nothing. But he put his hands together, beginning at the crotch, clear up to his neck, and as though the garment fused together. I could find no opening after he made this movement. And after that, he told me that your government gave this garment all kinds of tests, including firing a high-velocity rifle bullet, never creased it whatsoever. They even tried to put the laser beam on it. At that time, the laser, back in '59, was experimental. And he said it didn't even warm the surface. And then they said they tried the acid test. The acid rolled off of the garment and burned a hole in the floor. Do you know, about several months later, I told this story on the Art Linkletter show, and I started getting calls from the garment industry from New York that you wouldn't believe. They were fascinated with us. They wanted to know how they could get their hands on a sample. So anyhow, he told me quite a bit of other things, which if you've read the book, you've seen quite a bit of information he gave me. And I said, "Well, how long have you been here?" He said, 3 years. I said, "You met the president?" He said, "I met the president, the vice president, several members of the Joint Chiefs." I said, "Why did you come here?" I said, "I came to give your president ways and means that America could get along without sickness, without disease, and even without death." And he said, "Your president came back to me in about a year and a half, and he told me, sir," his name is Commander Valiant Thor, incidentally, Thor, again out of a science fiction book, huh?
Yeah.
And he said, "They refused my offer. And the President Eisenhower, his words were, sir, if we accept this information from you, it would completely ruin the economy of the United States." And I thought to myself, in other words, the drug trust would have to take the gas pipe, and that's about it. So he said, "I'll be here until March 16th at 8 o'clock. I'm leaving." I said, "How did you get here?" He said, "I came in what you call a flying saucer. In Alexandria, Virginia. We landed at 8 o'clock in the morning on March 16th. We were brought here after we were picked up by the local police department, and that was fascinating to me. Well, sir," he said, "I'm going to leave here, and I'll be back in 1 year." And sure enough, 1 year later, almost to the very hour, 8 o'clock in the morning, I hear a voice coming out of the back seat of my car. I was driving to my attorney's office in Beverly Hills. "Hello, Frank, how are you?" I nearly ran a red light. And we've been fast friends ever since.
Mr. Valiant Thor, I've heard rumors that Valiant Thor is still with us, is that correct?
Yes, he's in a ship. The name of the ship is Victor 1, and it's parked not too far from downtown Las Vegas on the edge of Lake Mead.
Interesting. And does he still look the same as he did back?
Exactly the same as the day that Augie took his picture.
Wow.
And I met his brother, Thon, Thonn, and his brother, Donn, Don, and this lovely lady by the name of Teal, which is spelled Teel. And these are fascinating people. I never had an experience like this. And my ministerial colleagues all over the world looked at me with one eye closed after that. But then gradually some of them even had strange and unusual experiences which more or less put them to my way of thinking also.
Mm-hmm. What is Val Thor up to these days?
Well, today one of his major projects is rescuing children from all parts of the world and placing them in homes in the United States and Canada and other places that are welcoming these lost children. Some of them are lost and dying. They're hovering on some of the garbage heaps before the major hotels in some of these cities of the world.
Yes.
And he's rescuing them and bringing them into the loving, open arms of fathers and mothers who really would love to make a home for them. That's one of his missions. And that's not the prime mission that he came here to this planet. Nevertheless, this was something extra that he's taken on himself. But basically, when he was at the Pentagon, he contributed much knowledge and wisdom and understanding to our space program, especially to the astronaut program, because they were having great difficulty in space, and he helped them to determine how in the world the space suits should be made, should be constructed, because how they could eat and how they could drink. They were getting vitally sick at the beginning of the astronaut program in space. Mm-hmm. So he helped them in that respect. And today he is watching carefully the events that are taking place in the world, and at the same time he's offering counsel and advice even to many world leaders today.
Well, very good. Thanks for sharing that story, Dr. Frank. Hey, I wanted to talk a bit about the legacy of Giant Rock and your involvement there. You were involved with the fabled spacecraft conventions in the past, were you not?
Oh, yes, for many, many years in the past.
Talk about those bygone days, if you would, a bit.
In those days, we met people from all walks of life. People came there by the thousands.
Yeah.
Some came by camper, some by car, some even on horseback, and some flew in their light planes. There was a short runway there. It couldn't adjust us out to jets coming in because it wasn't long enough, but small planes came in, including Bill Lear and many other personalities, speakers from all over the world. And the convention would normally run 3 days. There was a giant platform built in front of the Giant Rock, of course, and people would get up there and give their lectures and presentations. There were book stalls and book tables all over the place. And it was a fascinating time when people from all walks of life would get together and swap yarns and listen to the speakers, enjoy Mrs. Van Tassel's famous apple pie.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
It was really something. It was nice to get away for 3 days and go out on the desert. Of course, the meetings were held outdoors because of the vast crowds.
Yeah.
But there were speakers that came from various parts of the world who were some really you wondered what in the world they were talking about. Others did make sense.
I guess Val Thor showed up at some of these, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He was seen by quite a few people. And from time to time, including the Pentagon, he was personally instrumental in healing some of these individuals. There was one colonel. Now, this was an interesting story. When I lectured at near Solvang one day at a Presbyterian church, the place was packed. A lot of them were officers from Vandenberg. And this elderly gentleman came with his wife. He was on, both of them were on canes, walking with canes. And he reaches into his billfold and he produces Air Force colonel. He was an Air Force colonel, retired now, of course. He said, I was walking down the corridor and this friend of yours, Valiant Thor, he passed me on the corridor with 2 other officers. And he said, I was walking with a number of gentlemen, too. And he passed me, and he called me by name. And then we both turned around, and he came back to where I was standing in this corridor, and he said, you've been suffering with the stomach ulcers, haven't you? He said, you're not kidding. I was grounded because they wouldn't let me fly until I had this operation. And he said, your friend, he put his hand on my stomach, and I looked at the ceiling and uttered a few words. He said, I felt a warm sensation from the top of my head to the soles of my feet. And here his wife and he is standing there telling me about this, tears running down both of their eyes, I'm telling you. He says, I was completely healed. And I went to the doctor the following day, the military doctor, and I told him, look, I don't need an operation in a week or so, because he was scheduled for a tremendous operation. And the doctor says, oh, come on, will you please? He said, please, take a few more x-rays. Check me again. And he did check him again. He took the x-rays, and you know what the doctor said? My God, there must have been something wrong with the x-ray machine, because I find nothing wrong with your stomach now.
That's amazing.
Can you imagine that? And down through the years, I've traveled in many countries, and several people in most of these countries have testified that they've received a direct healing from his hands. And this is going on to this day.
Wow. One of the speakers at Retro UFO is the Reverend Bob Short, and I had him on a couple weeks ago, and he talked about meeting an ET extraterrestrial at Giant Rock back in the day, and he stated the same thing you did. This individual had no fingerprints. I'm not sure if he met Val Thor or not, but that was an interesting observation.
Yes, and this testimony has come down from year to year from other individuals who have had such communications. One of the other famous speakers at Giant Rock was Colonel Wendell Stevens.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a fascinating man to listen to. He's a man of great knowledge, and people enjoy his presentation.
Yes, and he'll be at Retro UFO speaking as well.
This weekend, right.
Yes, great. Hey, maybe at this point you could start winding up here. You can talk a bit about what you're going to be speaking on at Retro UFO, and then give our listeners some contact information where they can find your books, that type of stuff.
Yes, well, first of all, they could find information about our books as well as our organization, which is called the National Investigations Committee on UFOs, simply by logging on to www.nicufo.org, O-R-G.
Great.
Incidentally, the book Stranger at the Pentagon, has been scripted for a major motion picture.
Yes.
And I'll be glad to keep you updated on that if you'd like to. People like John Travolta are interested in playing the lead in that picture. Isn't that
yes, I interviewed Craig Campobasso. Am I saying that name correct?
He's a screenwriter, right.
He'll be at Retro UFO as well.
Too. Are you going to be there?
Yes, I will.
Good. Don't forget you owe me lunch.
Okay, you got it. Yeah, I'm going to do a little demonstration of synthesizer and the theremin inside the Integratron. Yeah. So,
if I may, I've done 3 videotapes, and now they're on DVDs of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Okay.
And my studies in the Dead Sea Scrolls reveal much about UFOs and the coming of space people. And a lot of this information has been deliberately withheld from the public, which causes me to wonder why in the world these people are hiding this information from the public.
Is it correct that within the Dead Sea Scrolls, parts of the Book of Enoch were discovered?
This is true. This is absolutely true. There are facts, figures, names, dates, and places of UFO events that'll knock anybody's hat off. And I'm telling you, the Rockefeller Foundation, of course, is in charge of the Dead Sea Scrolls in Jerusalem. Very few people know that. And why they are deliberately withholding this information that would be of such great value and interest to the public of the world is beyond me. I think it's wrong for secrecy on every level, especially some information that would really be a tremendous benefit to the human family.
It's interesting to note that the year the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered was 1947, which was the same year as Kenneth Arnold sightings.
Yes, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And they were found, of course, by this young shepherd lad who was watching his uncle's goats up in the Qumran mountain area, not too far from the Dead Sea. And when he discovered the large jars, he ran into town, got his uncle all stirred up, and when the uncle saw the material, the jars and the scrolls, he was more interested in selling the jars in the marketplace than he was the scrolls. As a matter of fact, he burned several of the scrolls to keep himself warm that night. And when some of the rabbis who later acquired these scrolls, I heard about that, boy, they nearly beat him up.
Oh, man. Amazing. Well, Dr. Frank, I know you need to get going this morning, heading out to Landers, California.
That's right,
So I'm going to let you go now. I got to get packing and hit the road as well.
Adam, it's been such a pleasure being with you.
This has been great. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I'll see you this weekend.
Very good. Thank you so much, Adam.
You take care, Dr. Frank.
Bye-bye.
And that wraps up this edition of Untamed Dimensions, folks. As we've been talking about, I'll be at Retro UFO 2 in Landers, California this weekend, along with Dr. Frank Stranges, Reverend Robert Short, Wendell Stevens, and other speakers on the topic of UFOs and their often interesting occupants. So thanks again, one and all. Keep those cards and letters coming, all of you out there in the great American heartland, to the pyramidal structures on Mars. Until that time, Maxwell, until that time.
Live long and prosper.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Who cares about the clouds if we're together? Just sing a song and bring the sunny weather. Happy trails to you till we meet again.
This has been a Film Waves presentation, darling.